Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Hull Youth Music Network podcast, the 5th edition in association with the Goodwin Development Trust and West Hull FM. If you are listening on the airwaves of West Hull FM, then a very giant hello to you. We are back with the 3rd edition of the Hull Youth Music Network podcast, and today I have a person here with me who also works at the Goodwin Development Trust. He runs his own game designs course. He's working on a game at the moment, and he's going to talk to us today a little bit about music in games, music in movies. It's Jed Rhodes.
Hello there.
Thank you for coming on.
I mean, to be fair, they kind of pay me to be here, so I have even less excuse to sort of not show up than most people would. So.
Well, yes, very true. Would you mind starting by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay. Well, I am Jed, and I am sitting in a chair, and I do things, and indeed stuff. Joking aside. So I am, the official job title is Youth Arts Takeover and Youth Music Support Worker, which translates to I am the guy that they get in to do the social media and support with things. So that most prominently involves me running our game design sessions. So video gaming, tabletop gaming, stuff to do with that, basically.
Absolutely amazing. So what's it actually like making video games then? Just briefly, if you don't mind.
It's... There's an old military adage that keeps popping up every time I do research on the military, which is hurry up and wait. And that kind of does describe video gaming a little. So you can do the really fun stuff like, ooh, art, ooh, monsters, ooh, battle testing, ooh, play testing, ooh, mapping. And then there's all the boring stuff where you're tweaking numbers in the back end for like 5 hours because you're wanting to make everything work just so. So it is by turns some of the most fun things that you can do, and also incredibly tedious, depending on where you are. But, a lot of creative stuff is like that. I'm sure you'll agree.
Yes, most definitely. So what video games have you made in the past then that have, playable? Is there anywhere people can play any games that have been made?
Yes, so the Goodwin Development Trust, our various learners and staff came together to make... There are 2 completed video games. So there's Underhull, which is something of a comedic, satirical game, which you can play for free on itch.io. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, we can put a link in the description below. I don't think West Hull FM can put a link in the description below. I'd be surprised if they could.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Listeners, there's a magical link in the air somewhere, right?
Somewhere there's a link in the airwaves that you can click while listening.
Absolutely. But no, joking aside, so that is on a site called itch.io, which is kind of spelt how it sounds. And the second game that we made during lockdown, which was a game called Isolated Nightmares, which is a sort of high fantasy game with dragons and such. And that too can be found on itch.io, both of which have completely original music, both of which were incredibly fun to make.
Absolutely fantastic. So where does music come in to making video games? Is that like a later on stage? And how does it actually work? And what kind of music really goes into games?
Ooh, all the big fun questions right there. Okay, so first and foremost, and this is like the important thing, gaming music is probably one of the most interesting, like, not necessarily genres, but it's one of the most interesting fields as a musician that I think you can work in, because you are, as in music for like movies or music for television, you're trying to set a scene, but so much of what you're doing sets the pace and sets the tone of the experience that people have within a video game. So, I mean, even if you go right back to the earliest sort of like the Mario theme and stuff, It gives people a sense of the thing that they are about to do, the experience that they're about to have. And so many of the best composers of like television and film nowadays have also worked in video games. So Bear McCreary did God of War. Michael Giacchino did the Medal of Honor series. Clint Mansell worked on Mass Effect 3. You know, there's some really, truly incredible, like Mick Gordon, the Doom soundtracks, the most recent ones. Oh, you know, that is where some of the most brilliant and creative stuff in the, I guess, in the music industry ends up being, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of like where it comes into the process, it sort of depends. It depends what software you're making games in. It depends what the genre of the game is. It depends on your personal process. If you know you're like me, if you're like an indie developer with a talent for music, a lot of my initial visualization of what my games are and what they will come to be starts with making video game music. Starts with, you know, making, okay, this is what I want this to sound like when I'm there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, some people, I was reading something about Mick Gordon's rather turbulent experience on Doom Eternal. And, you know, sometimes the process is you can do a lot of experimental work to sort of fit the tone of a game without doing all the nitty-gritty elements that go into actually, you know, finishing that sort of work. Because it's a bit of a tricky, like on a technical level, it's a bit of a tricky thing to work on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. So how easy, accessible is it for young people to get into making games themselves?
Well, it just sort of depends really on how you term making games. I would be a liar if I said that you'll be able to sit down at your laptop at home and make the next AAA masterpiece. Sorry, guys, there's like 300 people working on those. But like, if you think about the tools that people use to make video games, so
Yeah.
game engines, like the basic like constructive blocks, is stuff like the Unity engine, the Unreal engine. These are free. You need a fairly decent computer to run them, but they are free, and you can make stuff in that with a bit of sitting down and learning how to code stuff, but they've designed it so that it's open source and you can basically, you know, play around with it yourself at home. It's more accessible the more low-tech the software is. So if you look at the stuff that Goodwin uses, the software we use is called RPG Maker MV, which is designed to be ultra accessible. There's no coding as such required, and a lot of it is it's basically like 2D mapping almost, rather than just going in and messing with code. It's like, you know, literally just paint your map, put stuff on it, and go, which is ultra accessible, and it's more accessible because it runs on bricks, so you can have the worst laptop in the world, and if you can still run it, it runs RPG Maker. So that's more accessible. I think in terms of pure accessibility, getting into game development is about being realistic with what you want to achieve and knowing the tools that you're going to try and use. I think a bit of it as well is knowing off the top of your head roughly how long you're willing to put into it. So
yeah, definitely.
So like as an example, you can get a software like the Unity engine or Unreal, which is like the stuff they use to make games like properly these days, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of one solid day of work in the Unreal engine, you might have a block in a blank empty space that when you walk into it, it stops you from moving forward. You might be able to collide with a box. That might be the sum, and that might be the limit of what you might achieve in a day on Unreal.
Just a day.
Yeah, just one day.
Yeah.
By comparison, one day, like one solid day doing nothing else on RPG Maker, I could have 4 basic maps and events and scripts and all that stuff basically sorted.
Yeah.
You know, so
wow.
it is It's sort of, it is a thing about your tools, basically. Which is not to say that, I'm not going to be like a bad workman and blame my tools if the games that I make aren't what I want them to be, for example. But the tools do matter. The tools do matter. I mean, like in music, a MIDI keyboard and some cheap software is not going to be the equal of getting the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, for example.
No, definitely not.
But that's not to say that you can't achieve great things with either.
No, very true. So you're working on a game at the moment to do with the dig site that happened down near the deep. Would you like to tell us a little bit about this?
So that game is called, the current working title, and it's probably going to stick with this because we quite like it and it looks really good in the font, is Time Fort 1555. And it's based on, as Ash was saying, the South Block House excavation, which was basically Humberfield Archaeology sort of partnered with us for us to support them when they were digging up this Tudor era fort.
Yes.
Which was, an absolutely stunning thing to see when it was being dug up, and sort of amazing to learn some of the history around that. And the game is basically about, it's got time travel, it's got monsters, it's got like eco-fascists from the future who want to flood the city of Hull. And that one is going to be incredibly interesting, like from a game design perspective. And it has been incredibly interesting from a game design perspective, just messing around with, designing a particular space and working in a particular space. But, this is a music podcast, so I suppose the real question is the music side of it.
Yeah. Most definitely, yeah.
Which I have started the work on the music for that, actually. And it's interesting because every video game obviously has a tone that you want to hit with it, right?
Yes,
it has
most
a tone.
Definitely.
Yeah, it has a tone. It has a. So, as an example, Medal of Honor Frontline. The soundtrack for that was by Michael Giacchino. It's one of my absolute favorite game soundtracks ever. And when you listen to Giacchino's work on that, it's basically, it's Indiana Jones-esque. It's adventurous. It's an orchestral, exciting, adventurous piece that's all about being an OSS spy running around shooting Nazis. That's basically what that game is about. Similarly, the God of War soundtracks by Bear McCreary were very much, and are very much, there is that feeling of the orchestral side of it, the sort of primal Norse side of it, the medieval instrumentation in there, to sort of evoke living in that world. Now, a game about time travel, a game where you're traveling to the same place in a variety of different times, has got to evoke not just the times that you're going to be visiting, but then there have to be linking pieces, linking connective tissues that keep it feeling like it's all part of one world.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an incredibly interesting challenge.
Yeah, and obviously different music for the different times that you travel to. Obviously, if you're traveling forward, there'll be different songs to what there would be in the past.
And, the trick with something like that is, and it will always be, keeping it cohesive. So, making sure that what you're creating feels like it's all part of the same thing, whilst at the same time evoking the fact that you've got all these different eras of time. So, like, the trick to that is sort of knowing how you're going to connect it, whether that be through leitmotif, so linking musical themes, or whether it be through particular instrumentation. So if, for example, I pick a synth sound that represents time travel and time travelers, I can use that synth sound in every single piece and make it connect. So as an example of something that someone else did, I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the composer. I feel really bad. But there was an indie game called Star Renegades, which was about multiversal war, an invasion by an evil empire across the multiverse. And one of the motifs that appears in almost every single track on that soundtrack is a little wibbly bit of synth music that represents that evil empire invading different universes.
Yeah.
You know, so that kind of linking motif connects it even through several dozen different pieces of music. So it's an interesting challenge to think of how I'm going to make different pieces of music, you know, connect using motif, using sound. That's a challenge.
Yes.
But it's exciting.
Most definitely. So what programs do you use to make the music itself, and how do you put them into the video games?
Okay, so in terms of, I'll start with the second part first. So putting music into a video games, in RPG Maker, it's simply a case of exporting whatever you're creating as an OGG file. So
right, I've never heard of OGG file.
it's a weird one. So an OGG file is basically, the only way I can describe it is, it's a kind of sound file that RPG Maker uses to go, oh, here is a sound file. This is what the sound file sounds like. The tricky thing with RPG Maker is you need the OGG file and also a WAV file in there to be able to preview the music that you create. So the OGG file is what it actually draws upon to say, play the music in the game.
Yeah.
But the WAV file is what it uses when you're making it to preview the music.
Right, I see, yeah.
Yeah. So it's best always, in my experience, to export in WAV from whatever software you're using.
Yeah.
Then take it into, I just use Audacity for this, really. But you take it into Audacity and you just export that same track, that same WAV track, as an OGG file as well.
Right, I see.
And it's then relatively straightforward. You just put it in the appropriate folder in your project folders. As for me and the stuff that I use to compose, I'm hilariously, comparatively low tech. So I have GarageBand on my iPad.
Yes.
And I have a couple of other programs. So I have iSymphonic, which has quite a considerable number of orchestral sounds.
Sounds, yeah.
And I have something called AudioKit Synth, which is basically like having a CS80 on your iPad, which is good if you want to start evoking more of the Blade Runner-esque feel.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I'm about to make a game about time travel. If I didn't have some Blade Runner-esque synth in there somewhere, I'm going to be very surprised at myself by the time all of this is over.
Yes, most definitely. So as opposed to the game for the dig site, what's going to be happening with the game when it's done?
So when the game is done, what will probably be happening is there's going to be a launch event, and the launch event, there may be, I don't really know, because we've not really started thinking much about the launch event. I imagine that there may be performances of some of the music there. There will probably be the game itself available to play. And it's just... So the launch event is going to be in January.
Yeah.
So we're working towards that January deadline for both the RPG, but also the tabletop game that we're going to be making alongside that, which is going to be set around the same... which is going to be set around the sort of same place.
Yeah.
Don't mind me, dear listeners. I did just knock the mic because I'm a silly Billy, but it's fine. But yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to sort of see how that all plays out. And then in terms of the games, they will be available again to download on itch.io. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
It really will, yeah. And it must be exciting as well. I mean, I'm not sure myself, but is there any other games made that are based in Hull that you can play?
Well, to be honest, Under Hull was the first game set specifically in Hull that I was aware of, and that's the one that we made. That's the first one that we made. Hull has game developers in it. So, for example, Beta Jester work in Hull. They're a company who develop games. But I don't know off the top of my head, and do feel free to tell me this, dear listeners, if anyone out there knows of any games set in the city of Hull, but I don't know of any myself. where the city of Hull is like part of the story.
No.
Because I mean, if I'm being brutally honest, most video games set anywhere in Britain are either Harry Potter games set in Scotland with Harry Potter, or else they're games set in London because London.
Yeah, yeah, very true. The getaways.
Yeah, no. But you know, I think it's important in that respect to be. I mean, I could get on a soapbox right now. I'm sure people listening to this aren't particularly interested in hearing me soapbox, but I could totally get on a soapbox and say, I believe very strongly in creating media like this in Hull, and
Yes.
creating media like this that then connects back to Hull and is set in Hull and sort of uses Hull's unique everything as a selling point and as a starting point. I'm strongly in favor of, you know, like I'm really proud, like genuinely really super proud of the fact that Goodwin makes content like this in Hull and
Yes.
gives young people the opportunity to make content like this in Hull. And, you know, again, stuff like this podcast. Ironically, I'm talking about content like this in Hull. This is a podcast about music in Hull.
Yes.
You know, made by people
Exactly.
in Hull and being played on a radio station in Hull. All of these things are incredibly important, and it's more so now with all this cost of living stuff going on, but also more so when so much creative stuff is being centered, let's be honest, down south.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the more we can bring creativity, the more we can bring all of this stuff to Hull and make it accessible in the north, you know, the happier I think people in the north will be, because it creates opportunities and it shows people that they can create their own opportunities
Yeah,
as well.
or get involved
Well,
in
absolutely.
stuff that's going on. Most
Absolutely.
definitely.
And obviously, if there's anyone like within the specific funded age bracket of Youth Arts Takeover, which is 16 to 29, if there's anyone within that age bracket who wants to get involved, then, you know, I would absolutely encourage people to get in contact with us.
Yeah, would you mind just telling us, you know, ways to get involved?
The simplest way to get involved. So in terms of our music stuff, the simplest way to get involved in that is to show up at the Polar Bear Music Club on Springbank
Yes.
on Tuesday afternoons, because you'll meet Ash and Cameo, and you'll meet Ash and Cameo and you know, all the guys there, and just get involved in the music stuff that way. If you want to get involved just in general, the best bet would be to get in contact with Goodwin through any number of our emails. Mine is jrhodes@goodwintrust.org. But, you know, there's other ways of getting in contact with us as well.
Yes, most definitely.
Or just, you know, come on down and ask for information at, you know, the Thornton Village Hall or at, you know, the Octagon, because I'm absolutely certain that there will be someone here to talk to you about it. We love talking about what we do here. It's kind of our thing.
Yes, most definitely. So before we do finish up, I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. And I asked this one to everyone, and everyone that I have asked so far, they've actually struggled to answer this.
Shoot.
But if you could pick, what would be your most favourite song?
My most favourite, like, of all time?
Of all time.
Ooh.
It always throws people off.
Well, it's such a difficult question because I love so many different...
Yes.
I can tell you one of my favourite pieces of music that I've been listening to for the last few days, which is a piece from God of War Ragnarok called Rabe's Lament, which is done on a hurly-whirly. It's absolutely gorgeous piece of music. But, you know, if you ask me to pick one song, like, forever and always, that's one of my favourites, ooh... Manor House Rally by Michael Giacchino, from the soundtrack of Medal of Honor Frontline, which is, you go into a big French manor that the Germans have occupied, and you just go and shoot a bunch of German dudes, like a bunch of Nazi dudes, in a World War II game. Because why would you not want that? It's just, it's crazy, classic, World War II adventure bollocks.
Yeah.
It's crazy, classic World War II adventure nonsense. It's wonderful.
Yes, exactly. If you could make one dream video game, say you had unlimited funds or unlimited resources, what game would you like to make?
So there's a game I played quite a lot called Star Trek Online. I fall in and out of love with it all the time because time is not particularly forgiving right now. But that's basically a massive multiplayer online Star Trek game where you captain your own ship, you fly around in Star Trek and do Star Trek things. I'd make a game like that, except I'd make it more like the Mass Effect trilogy. So,
Right.
a big long storyline, lots of companion characters, in-depth storytelling, customization, all that stuff. And I'd really go full AAA amazing on making a Star Trek game, because I think it's the one franchise that's not really had the AAA treatment which it deserves.
No, definitely not. And if you could give any advice to any up and comers, music, video game making, what advice would you give to young people wanting to get involved?
You think you can't make things, but you can. You think you can't create brilliant art and share it with the world, but you can.
Yes.
You are living in a time of unprecedented accessibility and unprecedented creativity. It's all out there. You can seize it right now. Technology has made it so much more accessible to become almost anything. So get out there and do it is what I would say. And it's not gonna, it'll take a long time to yield the kind of rewards that you might think it deserves. But stick with it because you'll get there in the end.
Yes, most definitely. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for talking to us and shedding a bit of light into the upcoming game and a bit about game music in itself. If you would like to find more about these podcasts, listen to the previous episodes, you can follow the Goodwin on YouTube.
Yeah, Goodwin Development Trust on YouTube. You can also follow Youth Arts Takeover at Youth Arts Takeover on Facebook. And I believe we're on Twitter as well, but I can't for the life of me remember the @ because remembering all these @ is incredibly difficult, dear listeners, and my memory is shot. I have children. I don't sleep nearly as well as I used to.
Yes, also make sure to follow the Hull Youth Music Network on Facebook and Instagram. And also do not forget to follow West Hull FM on Facebook, Instagram, and also they have a website, www.westhullfm.co.uk, where you can find out more about the station, listen to other shows. Thank you for joining us, Jed.
Happy to be
Until the
here.
next one, we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.